Hey everyone, my name is Reading with Tatiana. I'm one of the monthly contributors for Literally Gladiators. Thank you, Josh, for inviting me to do this. This is my February nonfiction. This year, my goal is to contribute 12 videos and I want to focus on nonfiction every month. So I will always appreciate it if you also check out my channel. It's just my name, Reading with Tatiana. Today I'm reviewing 10 Years a Nomad by Matthew Kepnes, and I gave this book a 3 out of 5. The genre of this book, again, is nonfiction, which is my goal, but specifically I would say it's a memoir of his travels, a bit of traveling obviously, and also a tidbit of like self-help as well because he shares a lot of life lessons that work for him that he believes can apply to you when it comes to traveling. And this book was published in 2019. I'll start with a bit about the author, which also blends into the book because obviously, as a memoir, he talks about himself in the beginning. So, Matthew is from Boston, and he, after he graduated university, started working in administration in like nursing or a hospital or healthcare. And I think, like, almost I feel the stereotypical like American corporate grind. He just got sick of working the 9 to 5 grind, working for like several decades and then getting married, having kids, buying a house, getting a car, and then retiring. And he did a 2 week vacation in Thailand where he met other travelers and realized that there is more out there than just doing that cycle of working for a whole year, saving for a 2 year vacation to some exotic destination and then coming back. So he decided to quit his job. He saved a lot and then his intention was to travel for a year. But spoiler alert, as the book is called 10 Years a Nomad, his 1 year turned into 10 years. So that is kind of like who Matt is. And when he was traveling, of course, when you're traveling for 10 years, you can't just live off of savings that whole time. So at the time, he kind of traveled during an interesting time, I think, because that was before like Instagram and Facebook and YouTube kind of blew up. So he started a blog called, I think, The Nomadic Matt, and he was kind of one of the forefront people on a resource that people turn to seek out traveling resources. So he had a blog, and during his time traveling, people would be like, "Hey, are you Nomadic Matt? Hey, are you the traveling Matt on that blog?" So I think he was very fortunate in that sense, and also because of the timing, he was also reached out to write 2 books. One of them is obviously 10 Years a Nomad, which I'm reviewing today, and the other one is How to Travel the World on $50 a day, which sounds kind of crazy, but I've been very fortunate. I've traveled quite a bit, and I would say most places, especially in developing countries, and especially Southeast Asia and Asia, you can definitely travel for $50 a day. So I think this book is really fun and it's very nostalgic for me because I guess a bit of background for me is I've been very fortunate. I've traveled to most places, most continents in the world aside from South America and Antarctica and Australia. And I really enjoyed this book. Actually, a fellow friend who also travels a lot recommended this to me. And this book was very nostalgic because I've done a lot of like solo traveling, not just like traveling with friends and family. And a lot of things that Matthew talks about, I can really relate to. So that's a bit about Matthew and the start of the book. Now I'll get into the memoir and things that I liked and didn't like about this book. So one thing I really like about this book is the way it's formatted. So what I mean by that is the beginning of every chapter, there is a quote which kind of sets like the mood for the chapter. So for example, this one is, "A good traveler has no fixed plans, is not intent on arriving," by Lao Tzu. Or other one is, "No man steps in the same river twice," by Heraclitus, which I think is actually really funny because on my channel I review The Comfort Book by Matt Haig, which was my first book for 2023, and he quoted that same quote. So I feel like there's lots of like life lessons and philosophical questions that Matt and both authors, Matt Haig and Matt Kepnes, go through, and I think it's really great to start with a quote because it makes you reflect on what the chapter could be about. They kind of carry that throughout the chapter as you read it, and I really enjoyed that aspect of this book and the way he laid that out. I also really enjoyed that because I said I've traveled quite a bit myself, this book made me very nostalgic, and Matthew does a really good job highlighting all the great things about traveling, but also all the negatives too. So one thing that I really liked about his work is that he highlights, and this is something that I felt when I was traveling, where I felt like I was so fortunate that at the end of some travel days that I've lived multiple lives, and that if I died that day or like even now, I obviously want to live as long as I can, but even if I die today, I feel fortunate that I've lived multiple lives. And I think it's great that Matthew emphasizes that a lot of things you do by traveling, even if it's to one country or to the same city within your country, that's something that not everyone in the world has the ability to in their lifetimes. And it's just so important to be grateful and thankful for that. One other thing that I really liked was the whole object of traveling is not to set foot on a foreign land, it is to set foot on one's own country as a foreign land. So this is very interesting that he commented on this as well, because when I was traveling, I actually lived abroad for 2 years. When I came back to my home country, which is Canada, I kind of saw Canada as like a foreign country because I was so used to living somewhere else for a bit that when I came back, all these customs and cultural things that I took for granted being born and raised here, I was like, oh, that is different, or that is interesting. Why do you do that? So I think one thing that's really good about traveling is you come back and see your home with a different view, which I think is something that everyone should experience, because there's so many different ways to live, and just so your way to live isn't always the right or most efficient way. He also highlights that when you travel every day, you have a chance to be someone new. So, for example, for him, he was very introverted at home, but when he was traveling, he was like, why not? I'll go talk to that person at the bar. I'll go do this with a stranger because you'll probably never see that person again. And if you shoot your shot, but you have a great connection, you'll have a new friend, not only when traveling for that trip, but you'll stay in touch and have a new friend to visit in the future. So he says that the beauty of traveling is that you have multiple fresh starts. However, like I said, one thing I enjoy about his book is he also has the flip side where he says because of that, you also have to deal with loneliness a lot, and have to deal with meeting new people all the time, which can get exhausting. He also says that, even though you make these amazing connections because you're there, you're very present, you don't have to worry about the past, you just worry about that person there right now. You can be very true to who you want to be. However, it can be very fleeting because you can also easily lose those connections. And also, when Matthew was traveling during this time, it was like 2005, 2015. It was just the start of social media the way it is now. So some people, it was just you would stay in touch just by emailing. So it wasn't always easy to stay in touch, especially at that time. Not everyone adopted to emailing or social media. So he found it very easy to lose connections. And two other things that he highlights, which I really enjoyed because he focused more on like the down or negative sides of traveling, is because he became a travel blogger that he felt, and I think this is very true for people now traveling in the age of social media, because I am guilty of it as well, is when you travel, instead of living in the moment and just enjoying it for what it is, you think about getting the best shot, you think about how you're going to review it on your blog later, and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like he had the foresight to recognize what he was doing when he was traveling, and he had to then live more presently. And then also other thing he said, which I think is good about traveling, is you live 100 miles per second, but then the downside is you also get burned out. And he talks about how it's okay to feel burned out, it's okay to get tired of traveling, and it's okay to go home, because one thing when you travel, if you make a big decision to quit your job, sell all your things, and travel, is you can always go home. So this book was really great. I felt he had very good balance of sharing stories about traveling, but also about the struggles he had, and he was very realistic. And again, a bit of a self-help book, because I felt like if you're a big traveler and you feel burnt out, you may feel guilty, and Matthew gives you a space to be, it's okay, you're human. Now I'll share the Goodreads rating for this book. So this book on Goodreads got an average of 3.59 out of 5, which I think is very accurate. I think it highlighted great things about traveling, also the bad things about traveling, and I felt his writing was good, but because he is initially a blog writer. I felt like it was just a really long blog post, and he just compiled like all his thoughts over the years. So I'll share the bad reviews first to my other readers. Bad reviews where people thought that, like I just said, it could be condensed into like shorter 50 pages because it read kind of like a blog post. People thought he was self-righteous, he was entitled, he was shockingly ungrateful for his life, and then he also felt the book was pages and pages of complaint after complaint. Those were all the negative reviews. However, on the flip side, good reviews where people felt it was realistic of traveling. He highlights the good things and bad things. And it is a memoir, so he just shared the struggles that he had and things that he wasn't happy about. There is a chapter where he talks about he isn't happy with his life in America, doing the corporate grind, having a house, getting married, having kids, but he recognizes that's not true for lots of people out there. So I feel the bad review person maybe just didn't read that part of the book, or maybe it just didn't stand out to him, which I think is fair enough. I think you should read this book if you're interested to travel in general, but more so if you always want to wonder if you should finally quit your job and book that one-way ticket, because this book will tell you what that's all about. If you watch my reviews on my channel, I always have a segment where I like to share how a book made me feel. Because if you ask me a week, a year, 5 years from now, I probably won't remember exactly what this book was about, but I'll always remember how it made me feel. So this book, 10 Years in Nomad by Kepnes. As I said, I've been very fortunate. I've been traveled quite a bit, and back in 2019, before COVID hit, I actually quit my job to travel for 6 months until COVID happened, but ideally I would travel for a year. So this book made me feel very nostalgic for my travels, and it's just a book where I felt like I kind of wrote it in some ways, except for that now in my mid 30s, I actually do enjoy working that corporate grind, and I enjoy my routine and my life back in Canada. Thanks for watching until the end of my review on Literary Gladiator's channel. If you're watching this, I appreciate it. You can also check out my channel, Reading with Tatiana. And I'll see you guys next month for my next nonfiction read. Bye!